All right, you have to stop playing with the dog because we're recording. This is going to be a one turn with Jeremy Futrell.
And Matt McDougall.
Yeah, and all of my dogs.
All the dogs.
All the dogs. So sorry for that, guys. You're going to hear some weird stuff. We're going to try and limit it. We are doing a one turn on this versus that. We're going to take two opposing things and give our opinions on which one is superior. Because I think ultimately you could say with most of these, one is superior to the other.
Oh, yeah.
At least given a specific circumstance. So we went to the interwebs and picked brains, and this is what we got. Matt, out of the topics, is there a specific one you want to start with?
Nope.
Or, all right, then we're just going to run it down the line. We're going to start with one that I don't care too much about, because I think it's dumb that there's a rule about it. But 2 versus 3 tines on sheaf forks.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
so
lay it on them. What is your opinion on that?
Sure. So West Coast, they allow 2-tine forks, which is something we have to bring up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. East Coast, they do not. If you come through over here, you most likely will be told that your fork is unsafe and you cannot throw with that.
Right. And
because it's so safe to throw with 3 pointy things near your knees and arteries.
Right. I've heard a bunch of reasons as to why. Some people say it gives an advantage because it's essentially a modified fork, because East Coast, we do normally use 3 tines historically for farm work. Unless you're from Pennsylvania, then 2 tines are normal. But anyway, you're not supposed to modify the equipment, even though everyone does. That's one of those unspoken rules.
Oh, you mean our boots that we put knives on?
Exactly. So, I have opinions on boots. But anyway, it's the thought behind it is that you can get your hand in better, and also because they could be thinner, then they have a higher proclivity to snapping on you and shooting a shard of metal at someone. But it's dumb. It's silly.
This whole sport is dangerous. We throw hammers at people
Right.
on wooden handles.
Yeah, I mean, not to be that guy, but people have died doing this sport. It isn't safe. It's not horribly dangerous, but it's also, it's existing, and existing is pain. Yeah. But I don't think they pose any advantage, and because I don't think they pose any advantage, I don't think that they should be... Fuck. That was a gremlin, by the way.
Yeah, if you ever try and get a pug off the couch, it's apparently the noise they make.
Jeez.
Lord, I've never heard her make that noise.
No. Never heard anything make that noise.
Flag. We're going to try and edit that out.
Yeah.
But it came mid-sentence, so it may not happen.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, yeah, they don't pose a competitive advantage, in my opinion, so I don't know why we'd try to legislate that in any way.
Yeah, unless you can actually give me a legitimate reason for safety, I don't think there's a reason not to.
Right.
Now, I think in the spirit of this, it's this versus that. So if you had your preference, which one would you say is superior? Because I would say 3-tine. Because even pulling on a 3-tine that is springier, I don't like it. I feel like, and throwing 16 and 20 pound bags, I think is different than if you're throwing in the women's division and throwing 10 and 12 pound bags. But that's my reason for, if I had to pick, I'm picking 3-tine because I like something a little more steady to pull on.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that there's less friction with 2, but depending on how you file down 3,
it
could
negligible.
be right. I don't know that's a real. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's dumb that they're banned. I don't have anything else there.
Okay, so man, that went by really fast. That's
Yeah.
our opinion on 2 versus 3. Because honestly, it's just not a big deal. The fact that it is legislated is kind of silly. If you're picking up a tree, I think how many pointy metal things are on your fork is not the point of safety.
No.
So, anyway. The next one is highly requested. It was probably the most common answer, is spinning versus standing for wob and sheaf. A lot of people wanted takes on that. We think spinning's dumb.
The world records are all set standing in classes that are real. So,
yes.
that's that.
Now, here's your caveat, if you want to hear us all riff on this for a minute, is that if you are a very strong female, or if you are a very strong master or lightweight, you could hypothetically be an outlier who gets a very good spinning wob. You'd have to be insanely strong, so I'm not saying it's impossible, but freakishly, to have a fantastic spinning with the 56. Your body weight and your core strength would just have to be astronomical to pull that off. I think it is overall, it is a subpar way of throwing. So, like, if we were to take it, just let's talk about wob specifically. I think it's just too heavy to effectively counter for you to be able to counter and then put the correct force on it. Like, especially with a 56. Less so as you get into classes that have lighter weights, but it's just too heavy. There's too much going on there if you try and complicate it.
Yeah, and of course, there's some phenoms out there that are able to spin weights.
Yeah, put up a world class. And this isn't to say that your spinning weight may not be that different from your spinning wob, your standing wob, but that doesn't make it the better way to throw.
Right. I mean, for me, it boils down to what can you throw higher, more consistently, and what can you train? Also, what's the translation to and from the other events? And for me, every time that I've tried to spin a wob or spin a sheaf, it has absolutely demolished my weight for distance. I mean, like, it just ruins it. My timing is so bad, it ruins it. And I don't know if that's a number of years in the sport. I don't know if that's not confident in my normal technique. I feel pretty decent about it. But it ruins me to try to do it. And you guys may be better. And I'm willing to accept that. But I don't think so.
But we think you're wrong for doing it.
Yeah, you're probably better. But you're wrong about this.
It's a good chance. Yeah, I wholeheartly agree. And then for sheaf, I think you're just... Oh, God. It's such a weird movement. And the sheaf movement is so... similar, if done correctly, to a power clean. No one's ever rotated a power clean. Like, Lasha's never stepped up there and been like, man, I think I could really yank on this weight easier if I twirled beforehand. You need to be connected to the ground in order to throw, right? And when we throw for distance, we need to move because we need to create that linear action. But if you're throwing for height, being planted makes the most sense. I don't like spinning.
Yeah, I think the idea is to get more of a stretch reflex, at least on the sheaf, right? Out of your upper body, but like just swing back a little harder. I don't, right? Like, why are we...
Or get 2% stronger. Like,
that would be my honest answer. I was trying to stay away from that. But yeah, just get better.
Honestly, if your sheaf, and not everyone, but a good number of people are guilty of this, and I get it. You get to that like second or third year of throwing and you hit a plateau. Because that's how throwing works. You plateau events as they go, and your sheaf is stagnant for a while, and you go, maybe I should try spinning it. And you may even see a 1 foot increase just because it's a new movement, and so you might. But that's all you're going to see out of that. You're not going to suddenly jump your sheaf PR up by 6 feet because you started spinning, when in reality, if you had just focused on cleans and deadlifts for a little while and then gone back to standing.
Right. And like a foot is a foot, and that's something to recognize. At the same time, if you're not going to championships, and if that 1 foot isn't the thing that takes you to a championship, and if we're just doing it for fun, which we all are, then why would we do that? Like, why would we spend the time and energy to do something less proficiently when we could just spend the same time and energy and probably get the same amount of increase out of just doing it a less fucked way?
Yeah, I think for wob and sheaf both, they're one of the events here that you could say that getting stronger does have a very direct correlation.
Yeah.
Like, once you get a certain amount of technique down on those, if you just get stronger, it will get better. Like, there's no stopping it. All right. Man. So, yeah, that's spinning versus standard. Spinning's dumb. Boat shoes versus cleats.
Jeremy, would you like to lead this one off? You're known for...
Honestly, all right. In the effort of this is a this or that, I would vote cleats out of the two.
Sure.
Like, we're just taking that on its face. But I do have my own opinion about footwear and training that we can riff on here in a minute or two.
Sure.
But yeah, for this versus that, yeah, cleats for throwing instead of boat shoes. I think that makes a world of sense. If those are the two options, I'd rather wear cleats.
Yeah, no, that's fair. If it's dry out, boat shoes for me, because I'm fat and I can rotate better on my toes in them. So they're just like...
And I don't rotate on my toes.
Right. So like, for me, they're just a pair of shoe that sticks to my foot well that I like. So that's that.
There you go. All right, and if I'm going to go on my tiny soapbox for shoes, shoes shouldn't be your make or break. you should be a good enough thrower to where if all you brought that day were your trainers, you should still be able to get something done. Maybe you don't PR, but like, if your whole life hinges on, I don't have my 1/8-inch spikes in my Jav shoes today, you need to get better. That's my only caveat in that. No one piece of equipment should be make or break. As long as you show up with a relatively healthy body, you should be able to make something happen. If you forgot your wrist wrap or your compression cuff or whatever, like, you should be able to suck it up and still do within 10% of what you typically do.
Yeah.
So
Now then, I will have to comment that all my marks for distance, or my weights and my shot throw PRs, are all in cleats. So I do compete in cleats. I just don't. I don't always throw in them. Well, that's not true. Sometimes I throw in these in games.
I think you should throw in a pair of Crocs once.
I did my first games.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it happens. So
that's when me and Bryce became friends.
yeah. So guys, I will say cleats are superior to boat shoes, but it shouldn't kill your game if you had to throw in not cleats one day. Spray tacky versus pine tar was another one, and I think this is interesting to then break down further because I like different things on different events.
Right.
So we can tackle weights because some people do use tacky on weights. I would say don't use either. That's just me. I think typically the only people that do it are people that also throw in gloves, which we'll get to here in a second. But for tacky on weights, I'd say it happens so rarely that I don't know that there's a huge difference.
I don't think people other than me intentionally tack their gloves for weights.
Oh, no, they do. They tack the back of their thumb
Oh yeah.
to hold their hook.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not tacking the physical. If you're tacking the physical weight, you're a douchebag because you
Yeah.
hate everyone else's hands that's about to throw after you.
I don't
Because
really
you
just
were-
have the residual tack on.
You know, most people, some people will tack like the tip of the inside of their index or middle finger or whatever
Yeah.
catches their hook grip, and they'll tack the back of their thumb. Which I think is the only acceptable way to tack for weights. I mean, I think the whole point of a hook grip is that you don't have to do that.
Right.
But to each their own. If you have baby hands, then you have baby hands. That's your fix
Yeah.
that. But yeah, so on weights, that's my only thing. Now, hammers, I hate spray tack for hammers. I would much rather use a solid pine tar. We've been using Tiger Stick lately, which is incredibly solid.
Yep.
It's what they use for bats. But prior to that, and even still sometimes, depending on the weather, I'll use Throwbros tacky. I like the way that holds up as long as I put it on early enough and give it a couple seconds to solidify. I like that one a lot. I just find that spray tack is too thin, and something about the aerosol just feels like it breaks down whatever is already on the hammer, and you don't really get any out of it. Like, your tacky now doesn't mesh well with the residual tacky, and I feel like you're doing less, not more.
Yeah, I feel like for like the more resinous tacks, the liquid applied tackies like throwing toss and sauce or like Badger supplied Badger snot stuff or any of those, or even like Strongman tacky, to be honest, when it dries right on my hand, I have such a better grip. And if I were truly trying to just get the one in and take the time and I needed the hammer marks, I'd do that. Because I do feel like I can relax maybe a little bit more. It might be placebo, but I feel like I do get a little better stick. Otherwise, yeah, Tiger Stick just stays on my hand. And so I don't have to reapply, and it displaces water, so it doesn't matter if it's wet out. Tiger Stick still
Which
works
is a
in the
big
rain.
deal, because it's really hard to get actual pine tar tack
Right.
to hold well in the rain. That's, Cash, don't breathe into the microphone.
Yeah.
That's pretty difficult. So that is an upside. Tiger Tack is a good all-around option, but I do really like if I put on the toss and sauce and give it usually about 2 other people's throws. So typically if I
Right.
put it on right before I shag the hammer back in just a nice thin layer, and I only do like along the blade of my hands. I don't do my whole palm. I just do like pinky and ring finger area down. That'll hold up really well, and I can give it a second or two to set and go from there. So I really like that for hammer. I find it negative when people then throw spray tack onto it, because it's something about it feels like it breaks down the residual tacky
I agree.
that's on a hammer handle. You're kind of doing everyone else a disadvantage. Which, if that's your game, I mean, hey, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
Yeah. Tacky on Caber
Yes. So if I use tacky on caber, I don't use it every time. Typically what I do for caber is I will tape the closest to my palm knuckle on like every other finger. And that typically just gives me enough friction to where I'm good. My biggest problem is my hands popping apart when I go to get under a caber. If it's a really non-tapered, really heavy one, I will sometimes put a little bit of spray tack, but I don't use it on my palms to like hold the caber. I spray it just on that tape on my fingers just to help that hold. If you're spraying it on your palms every time because you can't pinch a caber, get stronger. Now, if you're not that strong yet, I would say for caber, spray tack is probably still fine either way. That's my preference there. I think the other stuff is too sticky. And I think Tiger Stick wouldn't work well for it either, honestly. It's too localized for what you need to do on caber. So, yeah, I actually go the other way for caber. I prefer spray tack.
Yeah, I don't use tacky on caber, so I actually have no opinion on this, but I feel like Tiger Stick would be the wrong choice.
Yeah, Tiger Stick would be wrong. If you have... Pine tar also varies so much, guys. Like, if you actually try 2 or 3 different brands of it, you will get 2 or 3 different results.
Yeah.
Because they all just set differently. They're all different in terms of how viscous they are and everything. So if you find one that works for you, honestly, I don't have hard opinions on it. Use whatever tacky you want whenever you want. My only caveats, if it's my personal preference, is to not use spray on... Don't spray it directly onto the hammer handle.
Yeah.
That's a douche move because you... Literally, there is aerosol in there. Like, there's other chemicals besides tack, and you're spraying it onto the tacky other people are trying to use. And don't tack your palm on weights because other people have to grip that, and you're going to tear their hands apart when you're throwing in a glove. So, like, don't be that guy. But otherwise, it really is just your personal preference. But for me, it's spray on caber and pine tar on hammer. That is. And no tacky on weights because that just feels goofy.
Yeah.
If you use tacky on stones, I'm not sure what you're getting at there.
Right.
It keeps coming off your chin early, so you just tack up your neck.
Yeah.
All right. Gloves versus tape in the weights. So we'll take it on its face for glove versus tape. I have a different opinion, but the question was glove versus tape. If I had to pick between those two, I'd go glove.
Yeah.
I don't like tape for weights. But I don't use either of those two things. I use something else. So I'll let Matt now take it up because he actually has more of an opinion on this than I do.
Yeah, so I do throw in a glove, and I would never tape my hand. So the difference is the glove is consistent for me, and it does allow me to tack the back of my hand or my thumb if I'm not feeling a grip on it. Why I actually throw in the glove is because when I hook grip, it hurts, and I'm, weak. So I don't like to... Even through a glove, I have blood blisters destroying my thumbs. So I wear gloves so I can take more throws. And in competition, I often don't wear a glove because I would rather it hurt than slip out early. So the tape for me is just like a deerskin glove is $10. Right?
Tractor Supply sells them real cheap.
Right. Like, and if you want to go cowhide and get something real fancy, it's $12. Like you're not actually... That's a couple rolls of tape, and sure, you have other uses for it, but it just seems like so much more of a hassle to redo it every time. And again, for me, the reason I'm doing it is to add a protective layer, a thick cushioning protective layer between my thumb and a thin handle. So on thick-handled weights, I don't wear a glove at all because it doesn't hurt me as bad. So,
there's your opinion on the question I was asked. Now, I will say... I just don't do either of those things. I just use chalk. So for one, I never threw off thin-handled weights until Matt and I started practicing together because he has some with the more collegiate pizza handle weights. I typically only threw off of a large ring, and I always hook gripped, and I just used chalk. And I said, if it hurts, too bad, because this is what the competition is. This is what you signed up for. Stop being a baby. And that's just what I've done for the last 5 years. And so now my hand tolerates hook grip on regular weight handles pretty well. I will. We did the 56 today for the second day in a row for me because Matt was available to throw. So today my thumbnail was a little touchy, and I just gripped it like a normal person and took half a dozen throws. But typically, I just chalk up. I like chalk for weights. I like to be able to feel the implement in my hand. I find that to be more consistent and just easier. So I'll take the secret third thing of chalk. Neither of those things. Growers versus grower. Someone asked that one.
Yeah.
So we will not explain further on that one.
No.
Deal with it. I wrote this one down as we were talking. Blades versus no blades for hammers. Which is superior? Blades.
No blades.
You're going to say that is this is no other things, just which one is superior. I'd say a bladed throw is superior. Now, if we want to get into, here's the other thing. Which one travels best? Which one is broader applications? Maybe no blades?
I watch people try to stick in blades for over a minute in the trig during their throws.
Where they should be then told to leave because there's a 60-second limit to get your throw in.
And not be able to find a spot and then not be happy with their blades and then throw mediocre. So for me, and looking at, half the pro games are off of carpet now, and you can't wear blades anyway. So for me, there is an advantage
Shut up.
to learning how, because it will set a better PR. But just for day-to-day practice and competition, at least on the East Coast, I gotta say, no blades.
Okay. See, I was going to take the approach of the same thing you said for spinning versus standing.
Right.
The records are set in blades.
They are, yeah.
So if we're only looking at which of those is superior, the argument is for blades because you can, in perfect conditions, throw further. Now, it's up to you when you show up to a game to go, hey, what's the ground like today? Is it worth? You should know how to throw in both. You shouldn't be solely dependent on one or the other.
So I would say that the argument that based off of the world record isn't as applicable in this because the world records are 5% further than any other throw in that implement ever, right? Dan McKim is actually 5% better in the light hammer than anyone has ever come since then.
Okay, well then let's look at Spencer Tyler's best throws. How are his blade versus no blade throws?
I couldn't tell you that one.
Yeah.
But
me either. I'd be willing to bet they're further.
Yeah,
or
probably.
Nick Aston, who we know he's having a
absolutely.
bang up year when he gets a hold of a hammer. He's
sure.
going north of 130. So and I'm pretty sure that's in blades.
For sure. When they can get them to stick, they work great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so in a perfect world, blades in practicality, because that's something we have to play into here because we play a sport that is outside in different conditions, and that'll become an issue, I think, when we talk about one of the other things coming up here in a second. You should know how to throw without blades, and if you had to prioritize one to be better at, you should probably work on your no blade throws. Trying hard versus trying less. Technically, if we're talking game day, it's a weird mix of both, but I would take try less. If you've practiced well and you have the muscle memory, you should be able to relax and do it.
I would argue try less.
There's a time to try hard, but
Right.
it's usually not for a whole competition day. And it's not if you had to put a broad theme to your entire training and competitive mindset, throwing is try less. You got to be loose and long.
Yeah, so there's a great expression from Olympic weightlifting, and it's warm body, cold mind, right? So, you need to be pushing and you need to be trying, but you cannot be overthinking. You can't be saying, ooh, I'm gonna really yank this one, or it doesn't work that way. So where you can get away with that and where you can do that is in practice, which is why practicing is so important. Because as most of us know, our best throws happen at about 80%, right? That is what we call 80%. But that is about the range where we can actually move fast but still maintain technique. I think so many people get in there and they, especially on the weights, they just try to yank it around with their bicep and they try to lift super hard at the end. And it would honestly go further if you just chilled out and just let it loft out there.
100%. Yeah, try really hard when you're drilling a specific part of your technique in training, but overall, a good throw start to finish, try less. It's counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. Anyone that's been throwing for any amount of time will tell you that if they get too in their head and are really thinking about it and really pushing it at 105%, you're you're going to blow out. You're either going to foul or you're just going to have a bad throw for some reason.
You know, oftentimes when I'm throwing like shit, which is oftentimes, and I walk away from whatever event I'm doing and I walk back to compete again, and I clear my head there, I'm not thinking, ooh, I really need to stay on my toe, or ooh, I'm not doing any of those cues during a game. I'm thinking like, stop bracing and move faster. Like that's all that ever moves through my head is like, let's slow it down in the back. Let's just move fast. Let's not oinga boinga it. Let's just do what we've done 1,000 times in practice and put a mark out.
Yeah, 100%. All right, belt versus no belt during throwing. Overall, no belt is where I'm going with that. I know it's personal preference, and some people may have their reasons, but I don't like having, because you don't need to brace through the vast majority of your throws. I think outside of height events or maybe a really heavy caber, you're not going to get anything out of it unless you're trying to just stave off an injury or work through something. But I don't like a belt when I throw.
Yeah, I mean, if you're okay, let's clarify belts. We're talking about like powerlifting hard belts?
I think at a minimum, like the Spud 2 belt.
Right.
Or we can break it down. I would make a blanket statement. If you're talking about like an Inzer 13 millimeter belt, no, don't wear that. That is goofy.
Yeah.
It's going to restrict you more than it's going to support you. Even for the height event throws. I've tried throwing wob with my actual power belt on. Mm-hmm. I can't stand it. It's terrible. So we'll rule that one out. But a general, like those CrossFit soft belts or the Spud Inc. deadlift belts that are still fairly rigid but are soft, I think are the most common belt.
Yeah.
We see a lot of breath belts now, which I don't think is not the same thing.
No. Okay. So I would say there's like one or two applications of a hard belt, like maybe wob, maybe caber, and maybe heavyweight for distance if you are a very linear drive up down type of person and don't get a lot of separation. But that's a very specific use case there. The one time I would say belts are almost essential in my book, coming from the track and field world, is hammer. Like a soft neoprene belt on hammer is a godsend. Or like
I've never tried my soft belt on hammer.
Just keeps your low back warm. It's great. I always warm up in a belt in comp.
I've got my little internal part that came with my Reband belt.
Yeah, that.
Interesting.
Yep.
Might try that. I usually just rub Tiger Balm on it.
That's also an option.
Yeah, so I think if I had to pick one, if you said you only get to throw every event in a belt or no event in a belt, I'd pick no event in a belt.
Agreed.
Like, I think they're too restrictive too often. Like, I'm not always going to have a caber that's so heavy I want a belt. And I find more and more, the more often I touch heavier cabers, and as I've gotten slightly stronger, I actually don't like it because I feel like I can't get as deep on the pick. It was a Band-Aid a few years back, and I've gotten better. And then really wob is the only one where I like to belt up nowadays. If you see me belt up on something other than wob, it's just because my back is hurting. Like, it's just because I braced too hard or not enough on something else, or I tweaked it, or I slept wrong at the crappy hotel I was staying in. And now my back is just twingy, and I'm like, let's just hold this together for game day. Like, yeah. It's not because I want to wear it on that event. It's because I feel like I'm going to die if I don't, outside of wob.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, yeah, so I would go no belt unless you have a very specific reason. All right, the second most popular one that we've been asked to address outside of spinning versus standing is also, in a sense, spinning versus standing. It's rotational versus glide throwing in the open stone. And you have someone who primarily glides here, and you have someone who primarily rotates. And a caveat, I've been exploring the decathlon thing, which is kind of a halfway between a shuffle and a glide anyway. So I'd still classify myself as a glide thrower. It's how my best marks have come. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to adapt for the last half of a fatiguing season. Matt, you want to start? Mr. Stone Specialist?
Stone Specialist? I think I'm a weight specialist, honestly.
For the game, yes, but out of the two of us, you're a better stone thrower,
sure.
For sure.
Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, I think gliding is superior, kind of vastly, to rotational stone throwing. Rotating on a concrete pad with throwing shoes on is, in my mind, superior. In a field that is unlevel, uncertain conditions, muddy, wet, just actually tilted, gliding is far and away the preferred method in my mind. That being said, you have to be a fast twitch athlete to get anything out of it versus a power throw. So if you have a proficient power throw and you aren't over 270 pounds, then you should be a glider if you have a decent squat and you can move quickly, if you get anything out of it. If you get nothing out of a glide because you're fat or weak or have just no fast twitch muscle, there's a third option there. Rotating is better if you can get something out of it. But most people can't, and it's way harder to learn, and there is a lot more factors that go into it, to the point that if I have a really really fast dry field, a flat fast dry field, I'm going to rotate, and I know that I can go closer over 50. And I know that if it is even a little wet out, then I'm just going to have to power throw or like decathlete glide, which I'm, again, playing with also. But yeah, for all those reasons, I think gliding is better, assuming that you're actually an athlete.
Yeah, I'd side with Matt. Not even for I never took into consideration the, fat versus thinner or fast twitch versus not, because I never really, before this podcast, had to think about anyone other than myself. I still don't do it very often. But I just liked the glide because it traveled better. I didn't have to worry about what field I was showing up to throw on. Oh my God, we're not even drinking.
No.
Showing up to throw on. What I would do is the same thing I do now. I have a pair of what used to be trail running shoes, and I have my Jav spikes. And really, that was my only consideration. Other than that, I was going to glide. Depending on the field, kind of made me pick which of those two shoes I was going to put on. And that was really about all the thought I had to put into it. It worked everywhere I went. And while it's not... Look, all my power throws are always within a foot of each other. My glides are within 3 feet of each other, Not of my power throw. I do get something out of my glide. Mm-hmm. But, so it is hypothetically a little less consistent, but that's vastly different to a rotational thrower who might get a hold of one and go 48 feet and then not get a hold of one and go 43 feet. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden things are all over the place. I like it for the consistency, and I like it for the fact that it applies itself well over different fields.
To add on to this, another reason why the glide is superior, in my opinion, is because of the way that we choose to throw Braemar. Braemar is better thrown when you start way over your driving leg and then coast and then slam into it at the end, which is how you finish a glide shot put or a glide stone throw. Whereas the rotational power throw, the position we get into when we finish a rotational shot put, is not the same. Our feet are closer together because we have so much more rotational momentum. All we're trying to do is jump at the end, essentially. That's oversimplified. But, we don't get into the wide driving position. We get into a jump straight up position because we already have that punch set up for us because of what we did in the back of the ring. So since we already have to train Braemar, why wouldn't we, unless you, again, have some outlier reason, like you were a college shot putter.
That's the other thing. If you're like me and came into this sport in your mid to late 20s and you didn't have any throwing experience, good luck trying to learn a proficient glide. I mean, it takes nearly a decade to get really, really good at.
A proficient rotation.
Yeah, a proficient rotation takes... Yeah, I said a rotational glide. That's not a real thing. A rotational throw. That is going to take years to get good at, when... If you're just mildly athletic, you can probably put a glide together in like a year and a half, and then you're just improving a skill that you have established. It's much easier.
Yeah.
So, glide over rotational. There are people out there that do rotate really, really well. That's not to take away from them. You made us pick. So there you go. All right. A unified governing body versus what we have going on now. Which one would be better? I kind of do. So look, if I had to pick out of those two, I'd pick what we have going on now instead of one thing nationwide. Or do I?
Let's
I don't.
clarify, though. There are a set of written rules on NASCA. We do have a unified rule book. Not everyone chooses to follow it, but the big games do. So we already do in some sense.
Yes, and that was what I was about to go into. I just was like, let me tackle the question that was asked, and then we'll get into the what is real and what isn't. So on the question that was asked, I like having Massa versus Shag versus
GLSA.
Backyard versus No Fame versus Glissa versus OKC. Like, I like having all those different things because it makes it more fun, honestly. And it's it's the states' rights arguments of sports, right? I don't like the way this place does it, so I'm just going to go somewhere else and do the same sport slightly differently because it's what I enjoy. I like that we have that choice, right? Like, that's more fun to me. So I like that, but with the caveat of there technically is a rule book on NASGA, or call them guidelines if you want to, because they're not insanely specific, as you may find in one of these smaller organizations, but there is an overarching rule. So I think if we really if tomorrow wave a wand and everything got unified under one umbrella, I think it could potentially be a detriment. The sport is not well established enough to do that yet. Like, you'd lose a bunch of people because if half of them didn't agree with that, congrats. You now only have 500 athletes nationwide, and that would be terrible. So yeah, I would say if I had to pick, I'd keep it the way it is now. I think the way we do things now could be improved. I don't think we should keep doing them exactly the way we've been doing them. I think you take it in steps. Which is why we're putting on a game October 21st in Rockville, Virginia.
Right.
So that's my take on that. Anything
Yeah.
to add? Yeah.
No, I think it would be, of course, nice in theory to have one unified way that we sign up for games and one unified way that we, compete and one style of toe board and
Oh, we're getting to that.
right. But at the end of the day, just train whatever the harder way is and you're always prepared.
Yeah.
Like, I have no problem throwing in a winged trig. It is not...
Seems much easier.
I've
never done it.
In my opinion, it's not harder, and I take a pretty wide stance in the back, and a fairly wide gate in the front, too. And I'm not a small person, neither is Jeremy, and I know some people don't like them.
You might think it looking at our pictures. I'm not small.
Right. We're actually both very much above average. So...
Back to grower. No.
Right.
You wouldn't know it by the pictures, and our hands are really wide. But yeah. The struggle.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have demons. Yeah. All right, so that segues well into our next one, wing versus standard trigs.
Yeah.
You want to pick first?
I don't think it fucking matters.
Okay, but wing versus standard. If you had to throw on one, you'd throw out a standard for the rest of your life? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I lied. I'd pick wing.
I was about to say, I think if I'm picking which one is superior, it's wing.
I'd pick wing.
And I didn't think that until talking to Chad like a year or two ago. Mm-hmm. And he said for judging, it's infinitely simpler.
Right.
You're in or you're out. There's no more of that split second, someone plays the tape back and goes, well, his outside foot actually landed a fraction of a second sooner than his inside foot. So that should have been a foul. Like, you're in the box or you're out of the box.
Bigger one than that for me on the finish. This personally, I liked wing trigs because I'm a rotational shot putter, and when I finish the throw, I have a tendency of putting my right foot where my left foot was, and my left foot is often outside the trig, so I scratch, which is very frustrating. So I think wing trigs are easier for me to throw in, and I go in a pretty well straight line on weight, so it doesn't matter for that, but there are a lot of throwers that when they start their weight throw, especially if they're all the way in the back and they have 1 foot outside of a normal trig, where if I'm a right-handed thrower, they will lift their left foot just ever so slightly, or it'll pivot, or it'll come off the ground, and that should be a scratch. And half of all throwers, pay attention next time.
You'll watch their left foot go forward by 4 inches, and some people it leaves the ground to do it.
Yeah, it's not sliding on the ground. Yeah. Their toe isn't dragging. It comes off the ground. And I know some throwers who do it intentionally to get a little extra step and lunge into it, where they will start narrow and intentionally get that gate into it, and it should be a scratch. Now, then that's not a problem on wing trigs. Now, I don't know that I really give a shit because that's not how the world records were set. So, but yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think a wing trig would simplify things and fix a lot of those issues.
I think so.
If we all went to them.
Yeah,
But I don't hate a standard trig. It's literally all I've ever thrown out of.
Right. And like the argument that you can cheat the angle on a winged trig because you're measuring from the center is only true on Braemar or power throws. Because if you are going diagonal by that much on a weight throw, you're not throwing it far. Like the extra foot that you get across a 80 plus foot lightweight throw does not matter by what you cut yourself off of. So
Yeah, I've never enjoyed the whole work the angle theory.
right.
Because the center of your mass is probably close to the center of that trig, even if you line up diagonally. So hypothetically, where the power has been generated from is the same regardless.
Because it is outside of where a normal trig is by
Yeah.
a foot, then you
Oh
can
yeah.
be that
If
much.
if you're small enough to be outside of the center of the thing.
Right.
If where you stand and throw from is actually to the left or the right of that center mark, okay. I'm just not.
Frame of reference here, Jeremy is 3 feet wide.
Yeah,
So
it doesn't work that way. And
all
when I
of
get
some
back
of
into
you.
a power stance, I've eaten up a good, well over half of that trig.
right.
It don't work that way. Oh, that dog don't hunt.
Right. Most of you guys don't have to worry about flying out the front of a trig, but
It happens.
It's a concern.
If I stay attached to that stone all the way through my punch, a significant amount of weight is now in front of that trig.
Right.
I have to reverse really hard. All right. And we're going to end on one of our favorite notes. Strength versus technique.
Yes. Strength.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the sense of if you had to pick one to work on, we could all benefit from working on strength. Now, you can't apply it without some technique. These two things actually do go hand in hand. They're hard to do a versus on. But this is our podcast, and we just want to tell you all to go get stronger.
Yep.
Deal with it.
There is actually one more I'd thought of.
Oh, okay.
And,
Bonus one.
This one we can actually, I think, talk about for a little bit.
We actually have turned this into like a almost
Yeah.
50-minute episode now. So,
Professional versus amateur.
it's literally
It's
us, and it's in the
right.
title of this. We should have had it
Right.
until 45 minutes in.
Yeah. It's on the shirt.
God bless it. Go buy a shirt, by the
Right.
way. Link in bio.
Please.
We're going to have to start an OnlyFans if you guys don't buy enough shirts, and no
Yeah.
one wants to see that.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
Professionals versus amateurs.
So first, I think we should say all the pros of each of the class we're in, and then all the cons of each of the class we're in.
I was like, there's no pros in my class. That's what
Right.
we're talking Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll take the AM side.
Right.
If this seems fitting. So the pro of an AM side is I can throw whenever I want, however I want. How often I want without having to deal with anything else. I can pick my games. I have that freedom. You do have to politic a little because you still, like, if you're an absolute a-hole to an AD, you're not getting in there. I cracked that joke at Eddie's expense. I may never get into Covenanter if he's just the AD from now on. And, hey, I'll eat that crow. Love you, Eddie. But, so outside of extremes, you really don't have to worry about keeping anyone as a friend or not. If they're a relatively professional AD, if you signed up first, you're probably going to get into that game. And then if you become a good AM, there are still invite AM games that you can go to. There's AM Worlds, there's Loon, and a bunch of other ones.
Yeah.
So you can still push yourself to be competitive and be the best one.
ECCs.
ECCs.
Dublin.
Yeah, Dublin. Loon
Estes. Loon.
and Stone Mountain, are they invite only for
Yeah,
A's?
I believe so.
For A's especially. Every one of Chad's games.
Yeah, true.
Invite only. So yeah, there's a lot of pros to it. Now the cons, money. I don't make any, and I have to spend my own to travel. So I'm in the red for every competition. There's no. You guys don't buy enough patches and stickers to pay for hotels, all right? I'm just trying to get a nicer microphone and maybe a laptop, and we're still really far from that. It's probably not going to happen just off the patches and stickers, but it was fun to do, so thank you. Yeah, the con is money. Honestly, at the end of the day, like I have to spend money on everything. There's no way around it. So
Yeah.
it'd be like that.
I'd say the other pro to the AMs is the community around it. Like, it is fun getting to climb. It is fun just with that group of people because there isn't the pressure.
Yeah.
Like, there is no...
I don't know. I put a lot of pressure on
Right.
myself.
But I'll get into that as a part of the con of being a pro. On the pro side, there are only really two main benefits in my mind. And that is, one, there is a little bit of money involved. Anywhere from a little bit to a lot of bit.
At least you're not losing money doing it.
You're not losing money doing it anymore. Unless you throw pro demos. But then yeah, it doesn't matter. But...
That's called brand building.
Right.
You write that off.
Exactly.
Don't even know what a write-off is, but you write it off.
Yeah. And then I'd say the other con is that, like, the other benefit. The other nice thing is that it is truly the highest competition base. There are some AMs that are incredible, and 9 out of 10 of them go pro, right? After a year or two. They do stick around. There are plenty of pros that would kick... there are plenty of AMs that would kick plenty of pros' asses.
Yeah, Brian, go pro already.
Right.
Everyone that beat me at ECCs, go pro.
Yeah, just get out of here.
Get out of my way.
But yeah, because it is on the cons, because it is invite only, because it is network based and who you know, someone like Freed probably will never go pro. His next closest game is 4 hours away. Like, for a game to get him out there, he has to take 2 days off work and be flown. Like, it doesn't make financial sense for a game that can offer a local guy $400 to offer Freed $1,000 to get him out there. Some games can afford to do that, and Brian probably will get to the point that he's a thrower that merits getting
Give him another
flown.
year and he'll be good enough to where he will get flown to
right.
the big games in Cali or
Yep.
in PA or in...
Or Celtic Classic, you know, like he's an awesome thrower. So Brian Freed is who we're talking about, by the way. But he throws like 3 games a year because there aren't any near him. So he lives in the middle of bumfuck. Another con to being a pro is just that it's just simply different. As soon as you're getting paid for it, it is now a job. And there are people that can think about it the exact same and say, ooh, wow, like, I'm getting paid for my hobby. And then there are people like me that think, like, shit, I can't do this poorly. This is
Someone's willing to pay me money
Something's willing to pay me money for this. I have to actually show up and do well and help clean up and help break down. And, like, there's a level of expectation that I've personally put on myself, but that is there of, like, you became a pro because you were a good human being as an amateur and because you had good marks. You can't let go of either of those, right? So there's just an amount of pressure that...
Hypothetically, as an AM, you could refuse to show up and help set up stuff because, like...
Right.
I paid to be here, not the other way around.
Yep.
I'm just going to show and throw.
Yeah.
And if the AD says, hey, pros, here's $500, but you got to help set up the sheaf rig.
Right.
You better go help set up.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to say no to a single judge ever again. You know what I mean? Like, that's not... When someone says, hey, we need help breaking this down, I'm sure as shit not going to be seen sitting there. I'm going to walk over. You know, I'm going to put the beer down for a couple of minutes. But, so that is certainly, you know, not necessarily a pro or a con. It's just truly different. We have guys like Jordan Patty who are choosing to be amateurs for longer so that they can actually still go do games, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
he's got a bunch on his bucket list that
Yep.
he may never get to go throw a game on the West Coast if he goes pro. So if he wants to go out West, he's got to do it as an AM.
Right. Like, it's...
Or Deep South or what, you know.
I'd say unless you think that you can be in the top 15 your first year and you already have a couple of games lined up to get there, then stay an amateur.
Yeah.
Like,
or unless you just know a lot of ADs.
that's it. Like,
yeah. If you were just well networked and you know that you're going to get 10 games a year,
right.
then that's another story too, right?
Right.
Like if you're just well connected and you know that people will pay you, you can do it.
Yep. I think it also comes down to, like, what Like, what's your work schedule outside of that? Do you have a wife? Do you have kids? Are you able to, if an AD called me tonight, literally tonight, Friday night as we record this, and said, I want you to throw in Maine tomorrow, it would suck, but I would have a best friend drive me up there and I would throw tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, I'd make it happen. So, and most people can't do that.
If I was still on patrol,
right,
there'd be no way I could go pro because 50% of my weekends I'm working.
right,
You know, just out the gate, half of the options are gone.
yep.
Like, it's impossible. I don't think if there's any other things we can squeeze into the comparison episode. Orbiting weights versus solid weights.
Oh yeah, the different types of weights.
Oh yeah, that was one thing. That was actually, look at that. I remembered the thing you
there
said.
you go.
All right, so block versus ball weights, and then orbiting versus non-orbiting weights.
Right.
I think for distance, before I had thrown on an orbiting weight, I said, I don't think I'll like that. I like being able to twist the chain as I wrap, and I like to feel that. And I still don't hate it. It's the majority of what I throw on at competitions. But it is really smooth throwing an orbiting weight. Like, it's less taxing on your body for practice, honestly. It's been pretty nice. If you guys come out to Lloyd Family Farms on October 21st, you'll get to throw on them too.
Yeah.
You know? So I will say I'd have to give the edge. Now, this is with the caveat of we haven't put the ring handles on them yet. Maybe it'll change it up. I don't know. I doubt it. But I've doubted things before and been wrong.
Right.
So I'd give the edge as far as distance events go to an orbiting weight over a fixed weight.
I'd agree with that. And to cut ahead here, I think that ball weights are better. Ball-shaped weights are better for WOB also.
Because they're shorter.
They're shorter, and when you collide with the bottom of a bar, if it is a ball weight, it will skip and go over. And if it has a flat surface like a cylinder or a box, it will crash
Clang.
back down. So ball weights clear better.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't know that I've ever thrown a ball for WOB. I throw can and I've thrown blocks. I've never straight up just thrown a...
Well, we can set it up next week.
We can. Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. But I will say so far, like, I like my rectangular WOB weight. I like the distance that it is for my hand. That may just be personal preference because it's what I've thrown the majority of my throwing career. But hey, this is my podcast, and there you go. That's what I want.
Now then, as a director, ball weights are harder to mark for distance unless you're throwing on like rock dust. But
which we will be doing in October. We've taken that into consideration.
right. But like throwing in a field, when you have people that are volunteers, when you have a giant L cut from the corner of a weight, it's pretty easy to mark. When you have a
big,
blow,
long, ovally shaped divot, it makes it a lot harder. So that is fair. Someone should put a bearing into a block weight.
We can. I mean, it's
doable.
They make the chain that just has the
bearing in it.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be prone to breaking easier. But anyway, we're getting off topic. Yeah, I would say that. Here's an interesting one. If in competition, a shot versus a stone. And there's multiple things to consider here. There's the fact that we are entertainment, and there is a traditional and cultural aspect to these games. Or does it matter if we just threw a 16 and a 20-pound shot?
So, here's something to consider is this isn't actually as a direct argument as most people think, because there are different diameters of shot puts still. So, collegiately, the highest we could have is 130 millimeters diameter, which means that we all threw 129, because you wouldn't want it to be 130, because that would be an illegal shot, right? So, we threw 1 millimeter less. But there are people that didn't like the high diameter shots. I actually liked indoor shot puts better because they were like 135 millimeters. And I could just get more of my hand behind it. Plenty of people threw like 117 millimeter, and this doesn't mean anything to you, but shots that are 10% smaller diameter, because their hands are smaller and they could get it tucked better and get it in their hand better. So just saying...
Parts.
Yeah, just saying a shot put versus a stone isn't necessarily as consistent as people think. It's certainly more consistent, but I'd actually say it doesn't matter, and I'd like to see some games that have a shot and some that don't, because
I'd like for some ADs to take the risk,
right,
and to just say screw it, we're going to throw shots instead of stones.
yeah.
I don't think it should be applied broadly, but I think it'd be fun to see.
I mean, you throw an indoor shot at indoor games, which are a weird topic, but like there are plenty of games that, including the Arnolds, where you're throwing an indoor shot put, not a slam ball.
Scores go into Nazca. Right. They're there. I mean,
yep. So, and actually in Scotland, even though their hammers aren't standardized, even though their sheafs are like bales of
even
twigs,
their wobs aren't standardized. Some of them literally throw a counterbalance
yep,
weight where the handle is built into a lead block.
Yep. They're squares or they're like, it's strange. But their shot puts are all standardized. They're all 16 and 22 pound, not
shots,
not stone and not kilo. 16 and 22 pound implements. So I guess 22 is 11 kilo. But anyway, it's or 10 kilo. My bad. But yeah. So like when we're talking about tradition here, the country that we're basing this off of doesn't follow the tradition, so I don't know
why we are.
I don't know why the fuck it matters.
Yeah. But I think that's it.
Yeah.
There you go. There's your either or episode, guys.
I like throwing natural stones.
I do. I actually do enjoy stones. I think they're a lot of fun, and it makes it feel better when you get a good one.
Yeah.
It really makes you appreciate a good stone when you have one.
Yep.
You know?
Oh, actually, rattan versus PVC.
Oh. All right. I made it sound like we were about to end this, but we just thought of two more, guys. So, rattan versus PVC for hammers.
Yeah.
On its face, I'm picking rattan.
Yeah.
I really like a well-maintained, well-made rattan handle. I understand why you would have PVC, and I don't hate it. I use it in practice every day that I practice hammer. But man, you get a nice rattan handle that's been soaked well enough, like at Badger Supply Company. They sponsor 50% of this podcast, whether Greg knows it or not, or wants to admit it.
And are sponsoring the Lloyd Games.
Yes. So it really is. I love a good rattan handle. If you've never thrown on one that's actually been properly cared for, you're missing out. They feel cool.
Yeah. I'm truly, again, indifferent, and this is weird, but because it depends on the PVC and it depends on the rattan. So a very thin rattan that's been soaked and it's flexible and very, this is probably the better comparison, whippy versus stiff hammer handles.
Okay, whippy versus stiff.
Right.
I'm picking whippy.
So I'm picking whippy every time. My PRs are set.
God, Dave's hammers were so whippy.
And they were incredibly whippy. I've surpassed that light PR though. But
for
it was on Schedule 40 PVC, not Schedule 80. And so I was able to get a little bit more bend into it, and it flicked, right? My best heavy hammer was on a piece of PVC, but it was it wasn't the 1-inch PVC. It was like 3/4, or it was thin, and I thought I broke it every time I threw it. But I could just generate so much fucking torque.
It feels amazing,
right,
when you let go of them.
So, and I know people that do like the stiffer ones because they feel like more connected to it the entire time.
You feel like you can chop down on it more,
right?
You know, which is valid. But
I'm a swing up, not a swing down hammer thrower. So I like thin.
Yeah, I'm more of a catch it at the low spot. I'm not necessarily applying a ton of force there. Like, I'm applying some, but I'm pulling with my core, not my arms. And so I feel like my connection to the hammer itself isn't as important.
Yep.
Do you guys realize how much of this podcast we record laying down? Just FYI.
Yeah. Truly relaxed.
Yeah, it really is.
Then the other one.
Telephone pole capers versus natural tapered trees.
Yeah.
Tapered trees all day long. One, I do love the uniqueness to them, and that, like, you get to hunt out games that have cool, nice capers, and I think it adds a little bit of an X factor too from the athletic side. I really enjoy that, like, you know, some guys aren't good with this kind of caper versus that kind of caper. I like the variety. I think it's part of the wackiness of our weird sport. I also just hate untapered capers because of the way I throw caper. Like, that's also just my personal preference. I'm not as strong as a lot of the guys that throw, so I have to be able to put speed into it and whip that top end over.
Right.
And it also just looks so much cooler. Like, if
That's-
we're going to be entertainment, it looks so much cooler to have people throw a 20-foot long tree than a 15-foot telephone pole.
That's it for me. And that's probably why I think that stones are better than shot puts, too, is
They look cooler.
it looks cooler, and it adds a little bit of mystique to it. Because, like, I know how far I threw a shot put, and if we were throwing a shot put, then, like, first off, I'd always be sad. And secondly, like, anyone can compare to that. Because most people, not most people, but a lot of people have picked up and thrown a shot put. And it might have been in high school or middle school, but they have some frame of reference for that. And if they say, oh, you know, in middle school, I threw a shot put 40 feet, and that guy only threw it 39, right? It's like, well, you were throwing an 8-pound cannonball.
Yeah.
We're throwing a 16-pound fucking river stone. It's different. But same thing. I've had someone ask me how much that fence post weighs at a competition in West Virginia because we were throwing telephone poles. And they're like, how much that fence post weigh? Fucking 120 pounds.
See, so that's the thing. And it literally just hit me too. It's the same reason why, Hummer tire deadlift at World's
Right.
Strongest Man is better than a standard one. Mm-hmm. Right? It gets more views than powerlifting for a reason, right?
Right.
Like, and part of it is a frame of reference of everyone in their life has touched a rock. Not everyone has touched a shot put. Everyone in their life has touched a tree. Not everyone's touched a telephone pole. You know, like, it's cooler, it's more relatable, and I think they have a better frame of reference for it, you know?
Right.
I think it makes it cooler.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So, now I think we're actually done.
Yeah, I can't think of any right now.
I can't think of anything else. Funny noise.